Hey everyone, I'm Jamie, and you're watching another episode of Suncrest On Demand. Now, before we go any further, I'm sure someone is watching your first Suncrest On Demand video. I'm super excited that you're here. Help me help you. Text the word Suncrest to 94,000. When you do that, we'll send a digital gift card directly to your phone for some coffee, simply for getting this far in this video. Now, here's the tip for everyone watching. Make sure you have the Suncrest app. When you use our app, you get insider access to things like past content, upcoming events, stuff to help you, your kids, and your students engage with their faith journey, and much more. Actually, if you're looking to take a next step in your own faith journey right now, our app is the best tool to use. You can find the Next Steps button right on the homepage. Take a look right now to sign up for baptism, join a group to find your people here at Suncrest, or join a serving team and make a difference. In our app and on our website, you can also partner with us financially. Your generosity makes a huge difference in Northwest Indiana and beyond through starting new churches. So, on behalf of all of us, thank you for using your finances to change lives. Now, here's how the rest of this video is gonna go. We're gonna experience some music. In fact, let us know a lyric you found meaningful in the live chat or comments. We're gonna experience communion. Each week, we focus on the sacrificial love of Jesus through a simple meal. So, now's the time to gather some food and drink to represent Jesus' body and blood. After the song is done, I'm gonna put a timer on the screen. Feel free to eat and drink when you're ready. After communion is done, we'll listen to this week's message. Once that's done, let us know something meaningful you heard in the live chat or comments. So let's get going.
Let the king of my heart be the mountain where I run, the fountain I drink from. Oh, he is my song. Let the king of my heart be the shadow where I hide, the ransom for my life. Oh, he is my song. You are good. You're good, oh, you are good, you're good, oh, you are good, you're good, oh, you are good, you're good, oh, let the king of my heart be the wind inside my sails, the anchor in the waves. Oh, he is my song. Let the king of my heart be the fire inside my veins, the echo of my days. Oh, he is my song. Let the king of my heart be the wind inside my sails, the anchor in the waves. Oh, he is my song. Let the king of my heart be the fire inside my veins, the echo of my days. Oh, he is my song. You are good, you're good. Oh, you are good, you're good. Oh, you are good, you're good. Oh, you are good, you're good. Oh,
you're never gonna let me down. You're never gonna let me down. You're never gonna let me down. You're
I was in the middle of teaching the message at last Thursday night's service when I knew that this next month was going to be a good month at Suncrest. Because I could sense in the room that the idea of people of a second chance had some traction. Now, when I talk about people of the second chance, which we're going to talk about through all of November, I want people to know there's kind of a double meaning to this. One meaning, a very important one, and one we saw activated last week, was that you may be walking in here feeling like you need a second chance. It might be because you feel like you've screwed up or you've been wronged, you're down and out for some reason. Today we're talking about running on empty. There's lots of reasons why people get into a place in life where they feel like they need a second chance, and maybe they aren't sure if there's one there. I'm promising you that there is one there. And last week, we had, just in this service, a bunch of people come down and hang out right after the service, and then about 15 minutes later, 3 of them were being baptized in our baptistry. It's just a beautiful picture of second chances. But the second idea behind people of the second chance is a reminder that as a church, we have to be a people of the second chance to others. I mean, all of us have received that second chance. And so wherever we go in our life, not just when we're gathered here, we want to be people who give others second chances because we represent God to who they are. Now, one of the funny things in life to me is noticing how different life stages work different ways. And in sometimes how quickly you forget just the previous stage once you're into the next one. The current life stage at the Lee House is the raising a 3-year-old stage with a dog who shouldn't be a puppy anymore but still acts like a puppy. You ever had that stage in life? What that means for us is that our 3-year-old, of course, was going trick-or-treating last Sunday. He was dressed up as PJ Masks, Connor, the cat boy. And he was all about it, right? He's singing the song in the van, "Nighttime is the right time to fight crime." There must not be enough of you here who have 3-year-olds because that's hilarious, just so you know. So here's the deal. He has this PJ Masks costume and his tail Velcros to his rear end and he's running around the house and it's cool until the puppy finds out that the tail Velcros to the back of him. And then the puppy steals it and then there's chaos all around our house. And we're like, let's just go outside and go trick-or-treating, right? He's at the stage of life where, he did this a few weeks ago. I don't know what they're teaching him at preschool, but he and I are in the bathroom together. Maybe that's too much information. He was the one going to the bathroom, just to be clear. And he goes to wash his hands and he turns out the lights. And he goes, ooh. Like, we got this ghost thing going on. And that's awesome. But speaking of the bathroom, I don't even know why I'm telling you this story. But this is the stage of life we're in. We're in potty training mode, right? Now, some of you have long forgotten that. Some of you are happy to have forgotten potty training mode. Some of you are preparing for it. It's awesome. I'm lying. It is not awesome, right? So with Davion, our 3-year-old, when we go with the potty training, of course, it's like every time he says he needs to go, we go to the bathroom, right? And I love to go out and go places with him. He loves to go watch sports. So we've gone to like high school football game. We have a couple of people in our church who play college soccer. We went to a soccer game. Well, you're doing this while he's potty training. And what happened was when I took him to the bathroom at these facilities, it became the first time he had ever seen a urinal, right? And all of a sudden, he's in love. He can stand up and do this thing, which he never got to do at home. And I'm like, now he's going to want to do it at home, but just got to create a mess. Why am I telling you this whole story? Here's the thing. He goes, once he sees the urinal, then he comes back to the bleachers and he feels like, he says, Dad, I need to go again. I'm like, you don't need to go again. But when you're potty training, you have to take him to go again. Did I mention that half the time when Davion's going pee, he farts? This is what he does, right? And the first time we were at a football game and there was one of those urinals, he really liked it because it was down really low and he could stand there and he was tall enough for it all to work out. And I'm telling you, half the time he farts. Next time we're at this soccer game and we're going to the bathroom. He says, I need to go. I walk into the bathroom. There's urinals, but there's none that are low enough for him to go to the bathroom, which means he's going to pull his pants down to his ankles and he's going to want me to hold him. Did I mention that half the time. Now, this is, I'm just going to stop telling this story at this stage. I'm already like, I've used half my time for the message. But this is my point. Like, these stages of life, like, when you're in them, you feel them, right? And then when they're gone, you're on to the next stage and you're doing something else. And some of that's raising kids. I see it in the big picture. And I mean, I can almost trace this all throughout life. Once you get through potty training in elementary, there's a stage of life that I think starts probably when you're early teenager and goes almost until you're 30. And I call this stage of life the momentum years. People who are in this stage, life is almost always just about the next thing. What are we doing? When are we doing it? Who's going along? Where's it going to happen? This stage of life has momentum because there's a very natural progression to it. Like you literally see progress. You go from being a freshman to a sophomore, to a junior, to a senior. Go to college, you get to do the same thing all over again. It's the stage of life where there's some momentum because first things are happening. You have your first real boyfriend, your first real girlfriend, your first kiss, you have your first date, you have your first car. You get maybe married for the first time. You have your first job. And it's almost like in that stage of life, you're just going and going and going. And all the questions we're asking are kind of those low-level questions. What and when, where, who's coming, what? And it's so energizing in some ways, isn't it? And then something happens. And some of you are, we're all different stages of life here. When you get into your 30s and maybe your early 40s, you start to have kids, life tends to slow down a little bit. It has to slow down. Well, let's say it this way. It doesn't actually slow down because you have so much to do. But life seems to start to shift into repeat mode. And after a while, there aren't all these firsts anymore, and there isn't all this momentum. And yesterday, actually, it just looks like today, and I'm afraid that tomorrow is going to look like today. And it's just the same. Because when you were first married, it was like, married. But after you've been married for a while, let's just be honest. There's a lot of people who live in a marriage that's more like married, right? And when you first have a job or you get a promotion, there's new progression to it. That's a job. But after a while, a lot of people, you have a job, but it's just a job, right? And kids are fun. I tell people our 3-year-old, he brings the most energy and consumes the most energy in our house all at the same time. And when you're raising kids, like sometimes you're just like you go to bed, your head hits the pillow, and it's like kids, right? And then it becomes life. It's like marriage, job, kids, vacation, woo, marriage. And it can be a real struggle. It can feel like something's off here. And it's a lot of times at this stage of life where instead of asking who, where, when, what time, we start to say, but why? Why? What's the purpose in this? What's happening here? And then somehow we try to stir in new energy to the equation. I know this is kind of a goofy question, but I love Under Armour stuff. Guys, how many of you guys love Under Armour stuff? Isn't it awesome? Yeah, so like I don't usually wear the brand or make advertisements for our online service, but Under Armour, go, right? So like I'm wearing this, I got Under Armour shoes. So I'm listening to a podcast in one of my kids was sitting in the passenger seat a few weeks ago. And in this podcast, they were talking about the chief marketing officer for Under Armour and how they targeted their products. And he said, we have a very narrow target. Our target for Under Armour products is a middle-aged guy who thinks he still has game. You laughed just like my daughter laughed while we were driving in the van. And that's why I made some of you raise your hand just a little bit ago, so you would feel the pain with me. But this is the thing, like there's a brand, or what happens is when we try to recapture some of the momentum of life at a little bit of a later life stage, so sometimes we have more resources, we have a bigger salary, we have more freedom, and so it's a new car, it's just a more expensive car. Sometimes, let's be honest, sometimes it's a second marriage. Sometimes and trying to reinvent yourself, trying to have a new start, a fresh start, but with artificial things to bring the fresh start. And a lot of times, if we're honest, some of us have lived this. It only leads actually to bigger scars and more of that feeling of running on empty. Now, I don't even know what to expect out of the next stage of life yet, but I do know that one of my favorite books of the Bible is a book in the Old Testament called Ecclesiastes, and I try to come back to that book and essentially this message every 3 or 4 years. Because I find that it resonates with people so much because so many people I know, maybe you, feel like, here's the truth, Greg, I'm kind of running on empty. So I'm going to read you the first 9 verses of the book called Ecclesiastes. I'll give you a little background and see if you resonate with this. It says, the words of the teacher, son of David, king in Jerusalem. So this is actually telling you who the author is. His name's Solomon. And Solomon is writing Ecclesiastes as a memoir. He is at the end of his life. He's actually already written 2 other books of the Old Covenant. There's a book that he wrote when he was young called Song of Songs or Song of Solomon. If you've ever read it, you know this. Like it's kind of a racy book. It's definitely the most erotic book in the Bible, and it's about being young and love and sex, all that kind of stuff. In his middle age, he had been observing the world. Solomon was an architect, an author, a philosopher. He was the king of a country. He was the richest man alive at the time and the wisest man alive at the time. He was kind of a Renaissance man. And so he would step back and reflect on things. And in middle age, he wrote Proverbs, which you should just read the Proverbs every day. There's great wisdom in the Proverbs. But when he got to the end of his life and he's looking back on the whole thing and all these different seasons of life, he writes this book we call Ecclesiastes. And here's his conclusion. Meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher, utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. Aren't you glad you came tonight? And then he gets a little reflective about it. He says, what does a man gain from all of his labor? What do you get from this work? At which he toils under the sun. Now that's going to be the first use of under the sun. It's going to come up again here in just a moment. He said, generations come and generations go, but the earth remains forever. He's kind of in this mode of saying, so what's the point? What's the meaning? What's the purpose? Why? Why? And then he just starts to describe life, and maybe his description will resonate with you. He's using imagery or metaphor from nature, from creation itself. And here's what he says. He says, the sun rises and the sun sets, and then it just hurries back to where it rises again. And I think what he's saying is, that's a lot like life. Just like the sun rises and the sun sets, goes back to where it rises, go back to where it sets. Like, that's a lot like life. Like, you got up in the morning and you go to bed at night, and you kind of have your cycle of things that you do. You eat at breakfast. You're running out the door. You're kissing your kids on the head. You're stressed out at work. You fight traffic on the way home. You come home and hope just maybe not to have arguments at home, and your head hits the pillow. And the next morning you get up and you do the same thing. It's just like the sun rises and the sun sets, and it goes back to where it rises. And you get up in the morning and you go to bed at night. You get up in the morning and you go to bed at night. It just seems almost like a meaningless cycle. Then he says, the wind blows to the south and it turns to the north. Round and round it goes, ever returning on its course. He says, there's this predictability to the sun rising, the sun setting, the sun rising, the sun setting. It's like our day where we start and we end, we start and we end. It just goes around and around and around. But in the midst of that, things blow in and they blow out. Things that you couldn't have expected and didn't predict. Things that make life a little harder, even as you're just trying to go around the sun. Your kid gets sick. Someone gets quarantined. The flight is delayed. Have you ever just stopped and thought, man, why doesn't life just work the way it's supposed to work? But it doesn't work that way. The wind blows in and the wind blows out. All while you get up in the morning, you go to bed at night. And then he says this, all streams flow into the sea, and yet the sea is never full. If you think about this for a little while, it will blow your mind. I mean, there's probably a ditch somewhere close to your house that might flow south into the Kankakee River, and the Kankakee River eventually flows into another river, which flows into the Mississippi River, which flows into the Gulf of Mexico. Our family vacationed in New Orleans this summer, and I was at the mouth of the Gulf of Mexico, and it's amazing, the millions and millions and millions and millions of gallons of water that have flowed from all over the United States and flow out into the Gulf of Mexico. And you know what I noticed? That water goes, and it goes, and it goes, but the Gulf of Mexico doesn't overflow. That's what he says. All streams flow into the sea, and yet the sea is never full. And his image of this is while you're getting up in the morning, going to bed at night, getting up in the morning, going to bed at night, the wind's blowing in, it's coming out, somebody's getting sick, the flight is delayed, all this stuff's going on. He says, and then you work, and you work, and you work, and the job is never done. It's never done. There's always more laundry to do, and the yard still needs mowed. There's more homework to be done. more emails to return. You work and you work and you work, but the sea is never full. The job is never done. To the place the streams come from, there they return again. And then this is what he says: all things are wearisome, more than one can say. The eye never has enough seen, nor the ear its fill of hearing. What has been will be again. What has been done will be done again. There is nothing new under the sun. Now, whenever I've taught this before, here's usually the reaction I get. If you're young, people come up to me and they'll say, Greg, that's depressing. But people who are old come up to me and they're like, I knew it. That's what life feels like. So what I want to do is I let Ecclesiastes unfold to you. If there's any part of your life where you feel like you're just running on empty, if any of this resonates with you right now, I want to offer you 3 realizations that I think we can kind of help to see some things about ourselves. And then out of these 3 realizations, give you 2 ways where life doesn't have to be this way. I do want to note this. It says at the end here, there is nothing new under the sun. That's the second time for under the sun. It's actually the second time of 29 times the phrase under the sun will be used in the 12 chapters of Ecclesiastes. And the phrase under the sun has a very specific meaning. The phrase under the sun means this earthly life. Actually, maybe more literally, it means this life separated from or apart from God. And what he's saying is, if you live this earthly life and you live it aiming at earthly things and you spend all your earthly energy, there's nothing new under the sun. The realization is this, that life under the sun is just a draining chase. One of the other images Solomon uses in Ecclesiastes is that life is like chasing after the wind. Because you run and you work, but you can never quite grab it. Or when you think you've grabbed it, it doesn't quite deliver. And maybe all throughout life, we're tempted with what I'd call silver bullet thinking. We start to think, yeah, but if I just had a different job, or if I just lived in a different house, then I'd feel differently. Or if my spouse would just get it together, or if my kids would just behave, or if I would find the right person, then life would be satisfying. But there's a realization going on that says life under the sun is just a draining chase. Fast forward a few chapters in Ecclesiastes. He says, I've seen something else under the sun. If you take God out of the equation, I've seen something else. Get this. The race isn't to the swift, or the battle to the strong, nor does food come to the wise, or wealth to the brilliant, or favor to the learned. But time and chance, randomness, happen to them all. Moreover, no man knows when his hour will come. And I think, let's just think about this together. This is another realization. Life under the sun, it doesn't deliver. Life under the sun doesn't deliver. It'll be up there on the screen in just a second. It doesn't bring us what we thought it would bring us. And part of the reason is that while we can make our plans, there's a certain randomness to this life that is entirely out of your control. Now, people who feel like they're successful love to dismiss the randomness of this life. But you know that almost everyone in this room was born in this country and given an opportunity here. And if you instead had been born in Liberia, Africa, or other places that we do work around the world, life would be entirely different. That's because there's a randomness to how the world works. There are things that happen to you that you do not deserve. When the drunk driver hits your car or your daughter's car, it's not fair. This is actually a picture of injustice, but it's exactly the way that the world works. When I lay out up here that God created the world and the world became broken and then he brought redemption and one day he'll bring restoration, we live in the broken part. And we shouldn't be surprised that while we're chasing after things and we think if I just aim and I work hard and I do what I'm supposed to do, then I'll get that and it will satisfy me. This life under the sun just doesn't deliver. Then he asks another question. What do workers gain from their toil? He says, I have seen the burden God has laid on the human race. That's the burden of brokenness. He has made everything beautiful in its time, and he has also set eternity in the human heart. What's Solomon saying here? He's been observing the whole world. And he says, hey, I'm not trying to preach at you. I'm just trying to observe how life has worked for me and how I see it working for everyone. If we set our eyes on things that are under the sun and we go and we chase them, sometimes we might not get them, sometimes we might get them and they won't deliver what we want. And the realization, he's saying, is that God makes everything beautiful in its time, not in your control. And that he has placed eternity in your heart. Now, let's think about eternity for just a moment. God himself is the only fundamentally eternal being in two directions. Before time existed, God existed. There has never been a time when God hasn't existed. He has existed forever, going back and back and back. As far as you can go, God is. And God will be. Forever and ever and ever, long after this earth is gone, long after there aren't any more calendars, long after you're gone, God is. He was the Alpha and the Omega. He is the beginning and the end. And what he's saying to you and I is that when you were created, he placed his divine image inside of you. This is uniquely true of human beings. And if you've never known this about yourself, I hope that this discovery helps you tonight. That eternity has been placed in your heart. That there's a spark of who God is there. And most of the time, while we're living on this earth, this thing that's eternity in our heart actually feels more like a homing device than anything else. It actually reminds us that somehow we don't quite fit in this earthly world. What's going on every time you reach for something that's wealth or pleasure or experience or whatever, and it's fine, but it actually isn't lasting. It doesn't deliver. What's going on is that God is reminding you that you were made for a world beyond this world, and you were made for a relationship beyond human relationships. When God created you, he placed eternity in your heart. And while you weren't here at the beginning, God says he created you to live forever with him. Under the sun, what did the scripture say? No one knows when his time will come. But that God created you to be an eternal being and to live, may I say it this way, on an eternal fuel. Augustine, one of the great theologians of early Christianity, described it this way. He said, God placed inside of you a God-shaped hole, a God-shaped void. And many times through our lives when we're gaining experiences, we know there's a hole in our heart and we're trying to fill it. So we try to fill it with people, with love, with human love, with things, with experiences, with cars, with houses, with dreams, with retirement, with everything else. And we can put it in that hole, but it doesn't fit. That's the point. And if you find yourself running on empty, depleted, it may be because you and I have been chasing after the wind. Chasing things that we can't catch or don't ultimately matter. And this is the realization that I run on empty until I tap into something above the sun. That no one should be surprised that in this life I feel depleted or defeated if my only aim is for what's here. Mark Twain said, the two most important days of your life are the day you were born and the day you figure out why. And I'm suggesting to you that as a human being made in the creation of God, part of the why for why you were born is attached to God. And we should not take that lightly. And if it's absent, maybe decidedly absent, like you said, I don't want God, or maybe just practically absent. People who say, I want God, but do nothing in their life to attach their life to Him. It is a recipe for running on empty. But we're a people of the second chance. So let me ask the question this way. What if I had a second chance at this stage of life? Whatever stage of life you're at right now, if you feel depleted or defeated or running on empty or tired, worn out, wearisome, what if you had a second chance to say the rest of your life doesn't have to be that way? There's an entirely different way to live. I would offer you two things. I would encourage you first to find my above the sun rhythm. To find part of a rhythm of life where you have regular experiences with the divine. That you don't live 100% of your life in this earthly mode, chasing earthly things. It is a recipe for running on empty. Around Suncrest, maybe you've seen some of us use this before. We use the image of a semicircle. And the semicircle is really the image of a pendulum swinging back and forth. And when you think about the way God wired us up and the way He described it to us, and then what Jesus taught us, you can think about it this way. Put these words on here. On one side, there's a rhythm to rest, or the scriptures, Jesus says to remain in Him. And on the other edge, there's the idea of work and fruitfulness. And many, many people live almost their whole life on this side. I got to be productive. I got to go after something. I got to chase something. And they never stop to just rest or have some experiences with God. And I want to ask you, if you kind of imagine the swing of the pendulum in your life, you could look at this as a daily rhythm. I want you to work, but I want you to rest. I want you to go be fruitful, but make sure you take time to be faithful, to listen for the voice of God. It would help you, I promise you, it would help you if you only take 2 minutes a day to sit and be quiet with God and just say, but why? And listen to His answer for meaningful things. To invite Him into your earthly life as it is now, but to say, God, I think you're the thing I need filling this hole in my heart. To give me purpose, to give me strength, to give me your Spirit. There's a weekly rhythm to this. This is the whole idea of Sabbath. And you might think you don't need Sabbath. Jesus needed it, but if you don't think you need it, fine. Fine. People say, I'd rather burn out than rust out. Well, either way, you're out. And if all you do is go round and round and round, and the wind blows in and it comes out, and you work and you work and you work, and the work is never done, so you never stop, you are not living the way God designed you to live, and it should be no surprise that you are running on empty. And so give yourself space in a rhythm of life with God. You can make the semicircle work annually. Take a vacation. Get away. Go rest. Your boss says, no, you got to work. You tell him, my pastor said, I need to rest. And maybe not everyone can get their mind around this, but fundamentally, here's what's going on here. People who refuse to rest, who refuse to remain or abide in time with God, I think there's a pride that's leading people to do that. But the decision to rest is actually the decision to trust God, that his way is better and his rejuvenation of you will be healthier. So you have to aim at a new rhythm. But here's the other part. What's the second chance? Find my above the sun aim. Listen, there's nothing wrong with the job you're working, with making money, with taking your kids to ball games. Nothing wrong with all that. But if it's just that, then none of us should be surprised that we get to a spot and we're like, but why? And I believe that for every one of you, you have a God-given purpose, a divine purpose in this life, that if you're putting your energy, and this is sometimes how you know what your purpose is, it aligns with the gifts that God has given you and the opportunities that are in front of you. If you live an open-handed life that says, God, I'm open to doing your kind of work as I go through my day, as I aim at my next 10 years, then it can be a beautiful thing. But if every aim of your life is below the sun, detached from God himself, I think you'll come to the conclusion that Solomon did. Meaningless, meaningless. All things are wearisome, more than one can say. So, God placed eternity in your heart. If you feel tired, depleted, defeated, or wearisome, this is more than just a generic fresh start, new identity, reinvention of myself to go chase all the same things over again. It's a second chance to have a personal connection with your Creator and make it part of the rhythm of your life. I want to encourage you to take some time each day this week just to listen to God, just to be quiet and listen, and let him set the aims of your life.
Before you turn off this video, hit the like, subscribe, and share buttons. We'll see you next week, same time, same channel. And until then, go and be the church.